A voyage on the Royal Clipper. Early last year, I heard about the world's largest sailing ship, called the Royal Clipper. Fascinated, I found out that in fact it operated as a cruise ship in the Mediterranean Ocean in the summer. Within a week, I'd paid my deposit for a 12-day sailing through the Western Mediterranean. This last European trip of the year left Rome, where my journey would begin on one of the world's most beautiful ships. The voyage left Rome, so I enjoyed 3 days there, soaking up the wonders of the ancient Roman Empire. As a photographer, I wandered through the Forum late in the afternoon with my camera blazing away. A tour guide I'd hired the next day claimed the Roman Empire was basically a Ponzi scheme, with the various emperors at the top. It finally collapsed when the Emperor Constantine left Rome for Constantinople. Interesting. Rome was full of interesting people, including these two monks. I finally made my way to Civitavecchia, the port of Rome, and got my first view of the Royal Clipper. Seeing the Royal Clipper for the first time is truly memorable. With its 5 masts and 42 sails, this is no ordinary cruise ship. It's a luxury sailing ship, and no matter where it's docked, people look up and take photos in every port. It boasts 439 feet in length, a beam of 54 feet. It has 5 masts, 42 sails, and 56,000 square feet of sail. It has a crew of 106 and carries 187 passengers. Interesting, on this trip, the number of returning passengers was 148, which shows its popularity. It is the largest square-rigged sailing ship in the world today. It is the only 5-masted ship built to sail in the last 100 years, and only the second ever built. The first was the Preussen, built in 1902 at the end of the clipper ship era. It was sunk in 1907 in the English Channel after a collision with another ship. The owner, Michael Kraft, purchased a 20-year-old hull that had never been used in Gdansk, Poland in 1998. The hull was finished to his specs in Poland and then towed to Rotterdam to be outfitted and have the masts installed. The building of this amazing ship required the imagination of many visionaries. For instance, all of the yard arms are hydraulically operated to swing so that they can maximize the use of the wind. All the sails are self-storing in the yard arms. The first British clipper ship was the Scottish Maid, built in 1839. By the 1850s, more fast clipper ships were built for the opium trade. The first extreme clippers were designed and made in Boston starting in 1845. The first of these fast clippers was called the Rainbow. This was followed shortly by the Sea Witch that set speed records of 89 days between New York and San Francisco, just in time for the 1849 gold rush. The AICH Club was an old but exclusive club for those who had rounded Cape Horn in a sailing vessel without an engine. In former times it had 2,000 members, but there are no longer any sailing ships without an engine, and the last to round the Cape Horn was 60 years ago. The society was disbanded in 2003 without any members left. The voyage I was on sailed from Rome, and the exotic destinations included Corsica, Minorca, Ibiza, Safi and Casablanca and Tangiers in Morocco, Cadiz, Spain, and finally Lisbon, Portugal. We set sail in the evening, and our first port of call in the morning was in Corsica, a town called Beneficio at the southern tip. Founded in 828 AD by Count Beneficio of Tuscany, it has a beautiful natural harbor surrounded by 400-foot cliffs. It bears a striking resemblance, evidently, to one that was mentioned in Homer's Odyssey. Once ashore, I explored the top of the cliff until I came to what turned out to be the Marine Cemetery. Very unusual. It was like a village of the dead. It is filled with hundreds of family mausoleums neatly laid out like miniature homes with streets. Back on board that evening, we were treated to an amazing sunset. I spent some time and visited the captain's wheelhouse, which was fully equipped with radar and several large chart plotters and GPSs. I quickly realized that the chances of us getting lost in the Mediterranean were pretty slim. The next stop was the port of Mahon on Minorca Island in the Balearic Islands, which are owned by Spain. We arrived in the evening and it was just beautiful. This video shows you just how spectacular the port was under the moon. On Minorca, I had selected a shore excursion of kayaking, and it was a magnificent day for it. We kayaked out for several miles to reach what appeared to be called the Quarantine Island. The young Spanish guide spoke only limited English, but the story he told was fascinating. Several centuries ago, all the lepers in the area were exiled to this island. Without the rule of law, they were fighting for limited resources until only a few families were left alive. Then just two people who lived at either end of the island for a long time, until one finally killed the other. We stopped at the island and a secluded beach and snorkeled over a beautiful reef. It was a very pleasant day indeed. The next port was the Balearic island of Ibiza. At this and every port we stopped in the Mediterranean, a pilot came aboard. The captain worked with the pilot, who is required by each of the ports, and brought the ship past shallow reefs and into the harbor. Ibiza. Wow, what a beautiful place. I met Deb and Ed from the ship, and the three of us explored the city and climbed through the ancient village to the cathedral at the top. Here we had commanding views of rooftops and the harbor with our clipper ship tied to the pier below. One of the big advantages the Royal Clipper has over regular and much larger cruise ships is that it can gain access to many small ports and coves that can't handle the large cruise ships. As well, they often get right into the smaller docks in the heart of the town, even in the larger ports. Ibiza is known as the party island of the Mediterranean. Oh, I picked this picture off the web. We weren't actually there. Despite being a sailing ship with only a 50-foot beam, the Royal Clipper's cabins were spacious and very comfortable. The dining room was 3 stories high and featured the bottom of the pool on the roof of the dining room. While swimming, you could, and I did actually, look down into the dining room. Very strange. Our next port of call was Motril in Spain, and a bus tour to Granada and the Alhambra. This magnificent palace and its grounds are the top tourist destination in all of Spain. Its origins date to a fortress built in the 9th century. It was rebuilt by the Moors in the 11th century and converted to a royal palace in 1333. After the fall of the Moors in Spain in 1492, it was used by Christian rulers but fell into ruins and was eventually settled by squatters. It was rediscovered in the 19th century by European scholars and slowly restored. It now exhibits the country's most significant and well-known Islamic architecture and beautiful garden restorations. The Alhambra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the inspiration for many songs and stories. The next stage of our voyage took us through the Straits of Gibraltar at night. During the night I was awakened with a crash as everything in my cabin was tossed about. Evidently some high winds had struck the ship, and in the morning we saw that several of the larger sails had literally been shredded, and repairs were soon underway. Yesterday's sails were made of different thicknesses of canvas, with the heaviest for stormy weather. But today the Royal Clipper sails are made of polyester, which helps maintain strength and shape. Now we're out in the Atlantic, heading down the coast of Morocco. The next event I chose was to climb the mast. Whee-oo! Not as easy as it looks, but fascinating once you get to the lookout. You felt the ship move in the Atlantic swells on the deck, but at 40 or 50 feet up, it was much more like a roller coaster. Oh, thanks. Once was enough. Captain Sergey gave us talks on various subjects, and one was about the corruption and payoffs in African ports. Usually the payoffs are all done with cigarettes. The ship carries dozens of cartons of smokes to pay off the pilots and harbor masters. Without this, they would require the ship to wait outside port and totally disrupt their schedule. Next stop, Morocco. This was my first time setting foot in Africa. Our excursion was from the small port of Safi through Berber farms to the markets and excitement of Marrakesh. What a place! I'd never seen anything like it, and as the pictures show, this ancient market was dominated by huge crowds, narrow streets, hawkers, scooters, bikes, and stalls that sold everything and anything. Want your picture taken with a monkey or a cobra? No problem. The next port was Casablanca, the largest city in Morocco and home to the Hassan II Mosque, situated on a promontory out in the Atlantic. The mosque has room for 25,000 worshippers inside and a further 80,000 in the courtyard. The mosque is also the largest in North Africa. The excursion I took that day was to Rabat, the capital city of Morocco. Home to nearly 2 million people, tourism and the presence of all foreign embassies in Morocco served to make Rabat one of the most important cities in the country. There we visited the former king's tomb and an impressive fort. Our last stop in Morocco was Tangiers, a beautiful European city. The excursion there was to Tétouan by bus through Berber country. In Tétouan we visited more markets and were entertained by a man dancing with candles all over his head. Very amusing. Back out on the Atlantic, we headed north to the Spanish port of Cadiz. This is very much a fishing port, and I love photographing the small fishing boats being tossed about near the shore. The fresh fish in the market included shark, and it was all on display for everyone to see. Our final port was Lisbon, Portugal, marking the end of our 12-day trip through the Western Mediterranean. While exploring Lisbon in the back streets of the Moreira district, I came across these photos on the walls of the houses, done as a beautiful tribute to the elderly who daily maneuvered the nearly vertical streets. As we took the scary yellow cable car that climbed the hill to the fortress, our ship lay way below us, tied to the dock. Now she was being provisioned for her next journey. Next was the long 2-week Atlantic crossing to Barbados. Given the rough 12-meter rollers we'd experienced heading to Lisbon, I was glad to be back on shore, saying goodbye to the crew. What an amazing trip on this wonderful sailing ship.